Alex here, 17 now, and my life has not been typical. That was difficult as my mother died when I was just 7 years old. Losing her altered everything. Back then, though, I was unaware of her leaving me something rather significant. Like life-changing grandeur. We'll get to it shortly. I wouldn't know about it until much later. My dad remarried 9 years ago. He wed Rachel, and along with her came Madison, her daughter 1 year my senior. Rachel's fine, although she sometimes become irritable trying too hard to be everyone's buddy. Madison's? She has that I deserve everything attitude, though, and we have never really clicked. It's not like we quarrel or anything, we simply lack proximity. After that is my half-brother Jake. The true turning point came last year, and that's when things went south. It all started when my grandparents, my mom's parents, sat me down for a serious conversation. He is 5 now, and to be honest, he is a great little person without drama yet. I assumed they would offer me some life guidance or speak to me about education, but instead they dropped the largest bomb I have ever known. As it happens, my mother left me with a trust money. Not only any trust fund, it's valued between $500,000 and $1 million. You did indeed read correctly. I became mute. Before they retired, my grandparents managed a profitable company that they sold for a lot. They laid it aside for me instead of saving it for themselves. Before she died, my mother had all set. She wanted to be sure I would be looked for should something happen to her. Particularly Rachel and her children, she wanted my dad and anybody else from touching it. I wasn't exactly happy when they informed me my grandparents oversaw the money following her death and made sure my dad had no idea how much was there. Not $1 could replace my mother, really. Still, it seemed strange to consider that turning 18 would mark a lifetime. It was a lot to digest. Fast forward to last year, and my grandparents believed it was time I know the truth. They wanted me to reach 18, become suddenly wealthy, and not know what to do with all that money. They clarified that my mother put this up just for me and just me, not Madison's style, not for Jake, and especially not for Rachel. Originally, I gave my dad little thought. I assumed he knew about it, perhaps not quite the whole sum, but something. One night I said casually that when I reached 18, I would be making a reasonable salary. Everything exploded at that point. My dad's face became white. He was not expecting me to inform him I would be seated on a gold mine. He began posing all kinds of questions. How much, from whence is it from, who is in charge of it? You know, normal things. Big mistake. The next thing I know, he's chatting to Rachel about it, and that's when things really started to go bad. I didn't want to lie. They seated me like if it were some sort of intervention. Their conversation turned to family and how we may all divide the riches. Then Rachel recalled Jake, adding, "He's only 5 now, but what about when he needs to go to college? Madison has great dreams of going to law school but won't be able to afford it without help that they clearly expected me to provide. If only you could assist, equip him for the future." I looked in wonder. My parents and grandparents expected me to turn over this money, which they had saved especially for me. They couldn't figure out how they would pay for their own children's needs. I informed them straightforward. This money belongs to me. My grandparents and mother confirmed that. Madison is not in mind here. Not for Jake. This is not Rachel lost it then, it is for me. My dad simply sat there nodding like she was making great sense. She went on this protracted tirade about how selfish I was, how unfair it was for me to keep all that money to myself when I had 2 siblings who could use it to improve their life. It shocked me. Rachel continued urging them as though I owed them anything. She responded, "How could you even think of wasting all that money on yourself when you could improve someone else's life? You should really worry about your family. Right through it. I could see. This concerned the money, not family. I stayed firm and informed them I would not be sharing it. If they were unhappy with that, too bad. Thereafter, the home started to seem strange. For some time, my dad and Rachel hardly spoke to me. When they did, it was frigid. It seemed like they were conspiring behind my back, waiting for me to crumble or guilt-tripping me into giving them any of the money. But here's the thing. I'm not dumb. Rachel told Madison not to worry one night, that they'd figure something out. I understood what they were working on. Mom arranged this for a specific goal. She took care to lock down the money until I became 18 since she knew this type of thing may occur. It was about more than just the money. It was about my mom's legacy and ensuring that no one deprived me of it, not about caving into their manipulation. Not my dad, not Rachel, nor Madison either. After the blow-up over the money, things at home grew even more strange. They could try all they wanted, but they were not getting paid a dime. You know the sensation when you could see people behind your back discussing you. That was the constant state of affairs. Every time I entered the room, my dad and Rachel would get dead quiet and stare at me as if I were the villain in the tale. They were acting rather weird. Madison wasn't helping either. His non-sharing of the money made me appear as though I was wrecking her life. As the days went by, household affairs grew more awkward. Rachel chose to elevate things, not only treat me the cold shoulder. She drew me aside in the kitchen one day when I was simply making a sandwich and started what I believed to be a sincere chat. "Alex," her voice full of false worry. I did not even glance up from my sandwich. "I really think you're making a mistake. You're young and you don't value of family yet. When you get older, you'll see that helping out your siblings is more important than any amount of money." Rachel glanced at me, obviously stunned by how direct I was. "Madison's not my sibling and Jake's half-brother. This money has nothing to do with them." She struggled to get back on her feet and began some long-winded remarks on how family is more than just blood and how I should be sympathetic. The same old schedule applied here. I was not falling for it. Make me feel bad, get me to agree to pay them money, and then everyone would be happy, except for me. I understood just what this was about. Things really started to turn around a week later when my dad and I got into a big fight. She wanted guilt-trip me into giving up half of my inheritance, and I wasn't not having it. To be honest, I hardly saw it approaching. After the first chat, he had been somewhat quiet about the entire money matter, so I assumed maybe he would leave it go. Boy, was I mistaken. One evening, he arrived home from work, and I sensed something was amiss right away. He seemed tight and hardly engaged in the customary "how was your day?" small chat. We sat down in the living room, and he began cautiously, trying to seem reasonable. Instead, he came straight out with, "We need to talk." You know that tone, the serious dad voice that makes you feel like you're going to be grounded. "Alex, I know you're young, and you might not fully understand what you're doing with this money. I'm not saying you have to give it all away, but Madison really needs help for college. Jake, well, he's got a future ahead of him too. You could really do something great for them." I could feel my anger boiling up inside, but I tried to stay calm. He snapped full on. "Dad, this isn't my responsibility. You and Rachel need to figure out how to pay for Madison's college and Jake's future. That's on you, not me." Usually, he seldom ever yelled, but he started screaming. "I've done everything for you. I've raised you, put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you, and this is how you repay me, by being selfish?" I could not believe what I was hearing. He was essentially claiming that I owed him my inheritance as he had done the very minimum of parenting. Though it was difficult, I attempted to keep my voice steady. "Dad, this money is from Mom and my grandparents. They set it up for me. You don't get to tell me what to do with it." He dropped the bomb that truly screwed my mind at that point. That struck hard. Your mom would have wanted you to share, not turn your back on your family like this. I knew, though, it was untrue. My mother had put that money aside just to help me avoid dealing with this type of strain. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, if Mom wanted me to share, she would have set it up that way, but she left it for me. After that, my dad avoided talking to me for days. She knew something like this could happen. Rachel wasn't talking to me either, but it wasn't anything novel. The home seemed chilly, as though I belonged no longer. I would either receive one-word responses or they would simply ignore me totally if I tried to chat to them. Madison, on the other hand, adopted a different strategy. It felt as though I was living among strangers. She hardly went silent at all. She really grew more audacious about the whole affair. I once heard her chatting in her room to Rachel. She added, "I don't get why he won't just give me the money. It's not like he's going to use all of it. He could at least help me out with tuition." It was almost hilarious how entitled she sounded, like it was just a given that I should give her any of my fortune. Though I wanted to burst into her room and yell, "Hey, newsflash, it's not your money!" I didn't. Argument with her would not have gotten me anywhere. Her corner included her mother and my dad, so what good was it? Things got more intense a few days later when Rachel chose to call in a lawyer. You did indeed read correctly. A lawyer. She asserted that her only goals were to explore all the options and ensure equitable handling of everything. Rachel made a great show of it, as if it were some significant legal conference. Right away I realized this was simply another ploy to try to scare me into giving up part of the money. The lawyer came over to the house. There was also my dad, but he kept quiet so Rachel could talk most of the time. She persisted in stating things like, "We just want to make sure Alex understands the legal side of things, and we're concerned about how this money is being distributed." But the attorney? He didn't appear very engaged. He essentially informed them there's not much they could do. It was airtight, and the money came from a trust created by my parents and grandparents. Rachel looked angry. The only way I could alter anything would be if I decided to offer them any. She seemed to be expecting the attorney would provide her some sort of leverage, but he dismissed her really fast. She then stopped trying to be polite. She hardly spoke to me. She would not even glance at me when I entered the room. To be honest, I didn't care. It seemed as though I vanished. Less I had to deal with her, the better. At this point, I knew things wouldn't get better. Just a few months away, my 18th birthday was causing growing strain in the house. Everyone seemed to be waiting for the time when the money would formally be mine, hoping I would have second thoughts. But I was not intending to. I started spending more time at my grandparents' place, just to get away from the insanity at home. My mind had been formed, and nothing would alter. They were quite helpful. My grandfather even made jokes about obtaining a restraining order on Rachel and Dad should they continue this stupidity. Knowing that I had people in my corner felt nice, but deep down I knew that after I reached 18, things would get much worse. As my birthday drew near, my dad and Rachel's conduct grew even more unstable. They seemed to be just waiting for me to make mistakes or alter my opinion on the money. Spoiler alert. One morning, my dad tried to pretend as though everything was once more normal. Fishing had been something we used to do when I was younger, but it had been years since we had gone. He was seated at the kitchen table sipping his coffee and out of nowhere remarked, "Hey, Alex, I was thinking we should go fishing this weekend. Just the two of us, like old times." Given his recent lack of precisely friendliness, it was such a haphazard offer. Knowing what Dad was trying to do, act all sweet to soften me up so I would be more open to sharing the inheritance, I just shrugged and replied, "Maybe, I've got a lot going on with school." But I was not dumb. Rachel was still up to something dubious while my dad was attempting the full nice guy performance. I was not falling for it. When I got home from school one day, Mother was seated in the living room surrounded by a lot of paperwork on the coffee table. I first paid little attention to it. She spends her nose buried in documentation. She gave me this phony grin and said, "Oh, just going over some legal stuff. We want to make sure everything's in order for when you turn 18. Yeah, right. Then I spotted my name on one of the papers and asked, "What's all this?" I could pass right through her. This dealt with my money, not simply ordinary documentation. Though I said nothing at the moment, I knew I had to watch her. Something about it didn't feel right with me. A few days later, everything boiled out. Once more, my dad got me seated, this time with Rachel right next to him. "We've been thinking, and we really believe that once you have access to the money, you should consider helping Madison with her college costs," my dad said. I knew this was coming, but it still pissed off, I said, trying to keep cool. Rachel, of course, jumped in with her guilt-tripping. "That money isn't for her. Mom and my grandparents set it up specifically for me, and I'm not giving it away." I had to restrain my tongue. "But Alex, you're going to have so much money, more than you'll ever need. Madison has worked so hard, and she deserves a chance at a good future. You could help make that happen for her." This was our future we were discussing, not that I didn't care whether Madison wanted to go college or something, and I wasn't about to let them grab it from me. Rachel's guilt trip concerning Madison didn't stop there. She started circling the room, throwing her hands in the air as though she couldn't believe what I had said. She cried out, "This is ridiculous. You're sitting on a fortune, and you're just going to hoard it all for yourself? What kind of person does that?" I could hardly get a word in before my dad got in also. "That was it, Alex. You have to consider your family. We have all given sacrifices for you, and this is how you pay us back." Enough was enough. Sacrifices? What sacrifices? I've been living here, going to school and doing my own thing. I haven't asked you for anything. And now because I was finally getting something for myself, you think I owe you? They both looked startled. Their expressions betrayed their lack of expectation of me pushing back thus forcefully. But I was done being kind. A few days following that fight, I received a call from the attorney for my mother. My dad had called him inquiring about the specifics of the trust money, he informed me. My dad apparently wanted to find out whether he could contest the way the trust was set up. I became enraged after learning that. I contacted my grandfather right away and told him everything. My dad was actively trying to find a method to have me turn over the money, not simply guilt-trip me. He matched my level of irritation. "Don't worry, Alex," he answered. "We've got everything locked down tight. Your dad can't touch a penny of that money, and neither can Rachel." That made me feel a little better, but it doesn't change the fact that my dad was ready to go that far. Now, it was more about principle than about money. To ensure my future, my grandparents and mother had arranged this. And here was my dad, attempting to take that away just because he and Rachel cannot handle their own money. Things became worse as my 18th birthday drew near. Rachel began to treat me even more frigidly, not even noticing me. Madison, likewise. It seemed as though I no longer belonged to the family. Every time I entered a room, the talks would stop and they would all simply look at me as though I were some alien. The house was intolerable, and I knew the instant my birthday arrived, they would make one more push for the money dot, then comma around 1 week before my birthday. My dad came to see me one more, this time without Rachel. He was still attempting to persuade me to submit after all this, but this time I hesitated none at all. "No, Dad, I'm not doing it. You and Rachel need to figure this out on your own. Madison's college or Jake's future is not my responsibility. This money is for me, and I'm not distributing it." He remained there gazing at the floor for a long period. That was the final chat we had before my birthday. So here we are. My 18th birthday was just over the horizon, and I was counting down the days. He nodded and said, "Okay, I get it." Like everyone else walking on eggshells, the strain at home was intolerable. Rachel had given up entirely, including even trying to be polite. She hardly talked to me, and when she did, it was chilly and far away. Madison, too. She continued at me from the side eye, as if I were the bad person for not turning over the money, and my dad? Though he remained far away, I could see the tension all over his face. Deep down, I believe he understood he had lost the fight. Yet it made no difference. The odd thing was that everything quieted in the last week before my birthday. Rachel and my dad were not pressing the money issue as much anymore, and for a little minute I thought perhaps, just maybe, they had agreed with my choice. But I should have known better. I went out with some school friends a few days before my birthday, simply trying to enjoy my life and ignore the turmoil at home. Oddly, the house was vacant when I returned. Rachel was always home with Jake. It was not like they would have just gone out without warning. Then I noticed it. A note on the kitchen table with my name. As soon as I saw it, my stomach fell. I sensed something was wrong. Opening the mail, I found it from my dad. His last-ditch attempt to get me to turn over the money was this. He was essentially warning me that I would not be welcome in the house going forward if I did not donate some of my fortune. That evening, I resolved I was not going to let them prevail. Dad, Rachel, Madison, even small Jake, we all ended up in the living room after waiting till everyone came home. I stared my dad dead in the eye and said, "So I found your letter." He didn't seem startled. The atmosphere was high, as everyone knew what was coming. He nodded, as though he was ready for this exchange. He groaned, massaging his temples like he was the one going through a difficult period. Rachel gave me this smug grin, like she believed they would finally break me down. "So, what's the problem, Dad? You're really going to toss me out if I don't's part of my money?" "Alex, it's about being part of this family. You have to understand that this money could help all of us. You are not being kicked out." I wasn't having it. Rachel promptly chimed in, of course. "Help all of us, or help you and Rachel not have to worry about Madison's college bills. Let's be real here. You're not doing this for me." "That's not true, Alex. We've always wanted what's best for you. But you have a chance to help your brother and sister. They're not my responsibility, I said, cutting her off harder than I had meant. When I spoke out in front of Jake, I felt guilty since I could see him quiver a bit. But just now, I couldn't back down. This money was set aside for me. Mom made sure of that. You can't just act like I owe you because you've got 2 other kids to worry about, Madison said, her voice tinged with entitlement at last. I turned to her, trying to keep cool but failing terribly. You're being selfish, Alex. It's not like you're going to need all that money. Why can't you just help out? The room became quiet. You're not entitled to my money, Madison. None of you are. I don't care how hard you've worked or what dreams you have. This is my future, and I'm not letting you or anyone else take it from me. Though he only glanced at the floor, shaking his head, my dad seemed as though he wanted to say something. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rachel, though, wasn't done. If you can't understand how much you're hurting this family, maybe your dad was right. Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live, because I wouldn't give up money that wasn't really hers to start with. My own stepmother was essentially urging me to go. Looking at my dad, hoping he would intervene, he simply sat there and said nothing. That is when I understood there was no turning back from this. They weren't stopping. I rose up, my pulse pounding. No matter how many times I said no, they would keep pressing until they had what they wanted or until I was out of the picture. He didn't glance back when I questioned my dad one final time. So this is it? You're really going to throw me out because I won't give you the money. I don't want to do this, Alex, but you're not leaving us much of a choice. That was it. I was done. Fine, my voice quivering. I turned and left the home without looking back, without waiting for a reply. I'll go, but don't expect me to come back. I just left. I never packed or said goodbye. Explaining all that had transpired, I phoned my grandparents on my route to their house. To put it mildly, they were irate. Usually calm, my grandfather was ready to drive over to my dad's place and provide him some mental clarity. That was a great comfort, but it did not take away the suffering. Rather, they assured me I could stay with them as long as I needed. Though I knew leaving was the proper choice, it seemed as though I had lost a great portion of my life. It seemed like some sort of betrayal. My own dad putting money over me. Simultaneously, though, I realized I could not live in that house anymore. Now it was about self-respect rather than only the money. The first several days at my grandparents' place were a haze. I couldn't let them shape me into giving up my future. Though the house still felt alien to me, I relocated most of my stuff from my dad's house. I slept poorly and kept going over the last talk I had with Rachel and Dad in my brain. Though the weight of losing my relationship with my dad loomed large, no matter how much I persuaded myself I had done the right thing. My grandparents were truly remarkable. They allowed me the time I needed to sort things out, and they did not urge me to discuss anything until I wanted to. My birthday eventually arrived, and I expected to feel different. We spent the following several days organizing everything for my 18th birthday, and at last reality began to sink in. Like reaching 18 was going to miraculously mend everything. In fact, though, it was only another day. The only change was that I now controlled the trust fund entirely. We reviewed the documentation my grandfather had ready at the kitchen table that morning. Though weird, it also seemed quite anticlimactic. That's when my phone started ringing. It felt like I had been waiting for this great moment for so long, and when it finally arrived, it didn't seem as earth-shattering as I had hoped. Part of me thought he was phoning to atone or apologies because he hadn't contacted since I left. But down within, I knew better. Alex stated right away, "Alex, we need to talk." You paused for a moment, then answered. "Not even a happy birthday." I moaned, being aware of the direction this chat was headed. "We've been thinking," he said, "and we really think you should reconsider your decision about the money. I understand that you feel like it's yours, but this affects the whole family." I couldn't believe it. "Dad," I answered firmly, "we've been over this. I'm not giving you or Rachel any of the money. It's mine, and that's final." She didn't even acknowledge what I said. Even after everything, here he was again trying to convince me to hand the money. Rather, he just kept on pressing. "Alex, you have to consider how this could help everyone. You don't want to burn bridges with your family over money." I could feel my patience slippering. There was a protracted silence on the other end of the line. "Dad, you kicked me out because I wouldn't give you the money. You made this decision, not me." He sounded to be attempting to control his emotions by breathing deeply. "I nearly laughed at you choosing to leave. I didn't kick you out. You told me to figure out where I wanted to live if I wasn't going to share the money. What else was I supposed to do?" he said, pausing once more, obviously not expecting me to push back so fiercely. "Look, this doesn't have to be a major fight," he remarked. That was it. Maybe get Madison through her first year in college and we will be past this. I'd finished. Before he could answer, I hung up. "No, Dad, I'm done with all of this. You're not getting any money. If you can't accept that, then we have nothing else to talk about." My heart was racing, and I felt relief as well as grief and resentment. Since I knew this was our final chance for that kind of communication, I really felt no shame about it. After that phone conversation, I understood I couldn't keep living in this limbo, waiting for my dad to come around. This was supposed to be my day, but I wasn't going to let him pull me back into the same debate we had been having for months. I sat down with my grandparents and told them everything. It was obvious he was more concerned with money than anything else. If he cannot understand how much this was straying our relationship apart, then there was no use in attempting to mend things. Reminding me that I had done everything I could to be fair and that it wasn't my fault my dad was acting this way, they were really helpful. Ever the pragmatic, my grandfather advised me, "Alex, you need to focus on your future now. You've done your best, but it's time to think about what comes next." He was correct. I had to keep moving forward. A few days after my birthday, I received another call, this one from Madison, not able to allow the avarice of my dad and Rachel control me anymore. Though I nearly missed it, curiosity won out. She didn't seem furious or defensive when I picked up. I hadn't heard from her since I left and wondered what she had to say. She sounded, in fact, calm, almost defeated. "Hey, Alex," she asked. "Can we talk?" I asked cautiously, then added, "Sure, what's up?" She sighed long ago. "Look, I know things have been tough between us lately, and I get that you don't want to give me any money. I'm not here to argue with you about that. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things turned out." I wasn't expecting that. "Thanks," I answered, not really knowing what else to say. "Never wanted things to get this bad," she remarked. "I guess I was desperate because of college, and I thought maybe you would help me out. But I get it now. It's your money, and you don't owe me anything." I didn't know what to say. Though another side of me valued her candor, another of me wanted to correct her. "Thanks for saying that," I at last said. "I wish things hadn't gotten this bad either, but it is what it is." Madison groaned once more. It wasn't really closure, but it seemed like a weight had been taken off. "Yeah, I know. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I'm still upset, but I'll figure something out for college." After then, things quieted down. At least she was no longer attempting to guilt me. Rachel cut me off totally when my dad stopped phoning. Madison never contacted me once more, and to be honest, I was not bothered by it. I was in need of distance. I had to concentrate on what was ahead. I remained with my grandparents for some time, and they guided me in creating a budget to control the money sensibly. We saw a financial expert to get everything under control, as I wanted to avoid making poor judgments or blowing all of it. Feeling strange. Here I was, 18 with more money than most people would have ever known in their lifetime, yet instead of feeling rich or strong, I just felt numb. The money did not constitute some triumph. It served as a reminder of all I had lost: my house, my connection with my dad, my mom. Still, it also represented my future at the same moment. I started planning my life since I had to defend a future of whatsoever. College, maybe beginning a business. I had no clear idea what I wanted to do yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in charge of my life. And it felt great. Regarding my dad, I had no idea if we would ever be back in harmony. Perhaps one day we would speak once he realized it was never about the money. This was my life now, and I was finally free to live it on my own terms. For now, though, I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to let anybody take away what my mom and grandparents had fought so hard to give me.